Good day and welcome to the Parent Portal podcast. This podcast is presented by the Student Remediation Center as a platform to provide parents with tips and recommendations for navigating through their child's life experiences. I am Mrs. Lewis, Principal at SRC Private Primary, and today I am joined by Alicia Halls of ALEMACSS Associates for a special bonus Parent Portal presentation. Today's discussion is centered around a topic that is near and dear to the heart of so many parents right now, which has to do with the fact that we're in a climate we are choosing schools for our kids. And today we're going to be talking about critical factors to be considered when choosing secondary school options for SCA candidates. The question we know at the top of so many parents' minds is, how would I know if I'm choosing the best school options for my SCA level child? And whether your child is writing SCA 2020, 2021, whatever, you find that it is important to remember it's not just about the right now. It's not just about the next 12 months, but we're having this discussion today because we recognize that these choices are going to affect your child's next 5 years, next 7 years that they spend in secondary school. So Ms. Halls, thank you for coming out. Thank you for joining me and welcome.
Thank you for having me. Welcome parents, good afternoon. I'm glad to be here, and I hope that you would get something from this podcast, because we have some information we want to share with you, and we know some of you are anxious. What do I put down? First choice, second choice, third choice. We are here to provide some information to help you make a wise decision.
Now, typically, in schools, Ms. Halls, you work with guidance, you work within the school system, and there are some typical considerations that we usually get into. And then there are some other things that we want to talk about today that we find it either gets swept under the rug or we don't think about it at all. And we really want to get into these nitty-gritties. So let's start off with the typical considerations. What would you say are the typical or the standard considerations that parents would look at when choosing schools that are important?
Okay, Ms. Lewis, one of the things that we find to the top of parents' list is the grades of the students and the school the children are assigned to in terms of how that school is doing academically. We know that there's a grade range, and parents who are signing up, you need to know which school is 95 to 85%, 75 to 50%, 50 under 50, and you need to know how your child is performing. So based on how your child is performing, you would have an idea of your selection. So if your child is performing, let us say 50%, would it be fair for you to put schools 85 and 90 or 95 and over? Would that be fair to that child? So one of the things I know is the grading. Then with regards to that 20% to the denominational schools, we all know that there are schools that are governed by the Muslim board, the Catholic board, the Presbyterian board, and in those cases, those schools are allotted 20% selection. People may call it favoritism, but it's based on the religion or what the board of the school decide as their criteria to accommodate 20% of their students. We also have looking at children who have certain likes and dislikes in terms of who want to play football, they want to do things, focus on a specific area academically. We have schools who do exceedingly well in sciences, exceedingly well in drama. So those are typical considerations that parents need to be mindful of. And I know some of you are already doing your research and you are mindful of the academic progress of a school, of if the school is into football, what is the 20% and the grades of a school. So those four things are top of your list. But as Ms. Lewis said, we're going to look at additional considerations, so other key factors that you need to be looking at.
Now, even before we get into other key factors, Ms. Halls, even as you're talking about research, we know that within our standard school system, parents would have been, and maybe are still having, meetings with their school teachers, principal, administration, social workers, guidance officers, and so on. But outside of those opportunities, how else can parents do research to find out more, so that they can make an informed decision as it pertains to the schools or the culture or the systems that they're going to get into?
Okay, so parents can feel free to visit these secondary schools. We know that we have the public schools, we have the private schools, we have the denominational schools, and we have the trade schools. Parents in selecting can visit the school and have a chat with the principal. They look at the facility. Is it a large facility? Is it a small and intimate school? What is the number of students? Most schools are 500 and over, but then we have smaller schools that cater for 200 children. So parents are free to visit the school. Yes, you have to follow protocol. It would be nice to call first and let the principal know that you want to visit their school, and find out what the school is all about.
Definitely. So we've looked at some of the typical considerations, but one of the other key factors definitely that we want to discuss today has to do with learning needs and special needs. Now, one of the things you mentioned a moment ago has to do with looking at where your child is at and being able to determine, okay, what are the school within those ranges? Of course, keeping in mind that every parent is out to push. Let's tell the truth. We out to push to see how high we could get those grades to move. But keeping that in mind, one of the things we do want to consider as educators, social workers, and as parents is, what are your child's learning needs? How does your child function? And does my child have any special or other needs that need to be considered when choosing a school? Anything to share on this, Miss?
I would like to share on the fact that there are children with special needs, and parents need to be mindful of identifying those needs. It is sad that, a lot of times children are not diagnosed at an early age. Some of them have never been diagnosed. However, parents talk about children having headaches when there's a lot of noise. We have other medical diagnoses as deafness, blindness. Yes, we have special schools carded for these children, but there are children that are not 100% deaf. So you would find them wearing a hearing aid and get into the primary school system, and they would follow the same process of writing SEA and going across into the secondary school system. So we have medical needs. We also have children with disabilities, and I'm not just talking about learning disabilities. We have children with spinal injuries that would have caused disabilities. We have children with what we would consider to be birth disabilities, but they can function in a normal setting once certain provisions are made. It is good for parents to be mindful of where they are placing their children. Let it not be said that, I didn't go and fully investigate to see if the school has a ramp or if the school caters to my child. Yes, you can apply for an aid with the Ministry of Education to get some assistance, but let us look at the school environment. Is the school environment so large that your child can feel lost and get lost, or there are so many stairs in the school that the child is not able to go to certain classes? These are things that we need to be mindful of, and parents need to ask the right question when they go to the school or when they come to the ministry. They need to be honest at times and share the information, because a lot of times we realize that children may have medical needs and they may have disabilities, and the parents are ashamed and they keep it a secret. And only when the child gets into difficulty at secondary school, then we realize, hey, this may not have been the best school for my child to go to, right? So parents need to be mindful and they need to be honest as to what it is your children are facing, and if that school that you are selecting will be able to cater for those needs.
Now, it's good that you started off chatting about special needs, special education needs, and we want to remind parents that when we talk about special education needs, there is a range that we want you to be mindful of. There is autism, deafness, emotional disturbance, hearing impairment, intellectual disabilities, multiple disabilities. There is orthopedic impairment, other health impairments such as ADHD. There is speech and language impairments, in some cases where there might have been traumatic brain injury or visual impairment. And if your child falls under any of these special education categories, it's important for you to keep that in mind when choosing your school. Granted, just because your child or a child may have a special education need doesn't necessarily mean you need to pull them out of school to go to a special school. But within Trinidad and Tobago, inclusion is something that is supported and encouraged. And so because we do have an inclusive school system here locally within our Trinidad and Tobago landscape, you want to be mindful of that to ensure that the school that you are encouraging or you're listing is able to cater to the needs of your child, whatever the special education need is, and or to be able to support and however the child may develop because of that special education need over the next 5 to 7 years. Now, some parents listening may be thinking, oh, well, this doesn't apply to me. My child is not a special education child. But has your child shown through academic progression or performance indications that he or she might be a slow learner or remedial learner? And of course, unfortunately, we tend to use these words loosely sometimes. So just to clarify, what we want you to understand, parents, is that students with below average cognitive abilities whom we cannot term as being disabled are called slow learners. And I want to repeat that for you. Students with below average cognitive abilities with whom we cannot term as disabled are called slow learners. Now, slow learners should not be confused with students in need of special education or reluctant learners who are non-cooperative. But the bottom line is that when we have children who are slow to learn, we need to be able to be mindful of what their needs are, what the challenges are, and be able to surround them by a learning environment that is able to support the challenges that they're having. Now, when we start talking about remedial programs, we're talking about programs that are for students who have higher than average intellectual abilities, but they are not performing well in school. So the child is not necessarily slow where they have below average. They have higher than average, but they're still not performing well. And you want to be mindful, and I'll give you a simple example of how that sounds. It sounds, and Miss, you could tell me your experience. It sounds like when parents come to you and say, I know he have the potential, I know he could do it, but for some reason, I know they could do it, but we're not getting the grades. So that is an indication that remediation is needed. And you want to make sure that you're getting your child, or at least applying and listing schools that are able to support your child through remedial education interventions. So it's not just about saying, oh yeah, you go to school and you go to class, but even if your child is not special need, and let's say your child is not a mainstream, typical average learner, go to school, learn, remembers well, performs well, but there are challenges in there. It's important, parents, that you be honest with yourself to ask, is my child showing up, or have a performance that might indicate that the child may be a slow learner, or the child may be in need of remedial intervention. Because if the answer is yes, that is not going to be solved in the next 12 months spontaneously. If your child has shown indications from preschool to standard 4, from standard 1 to standard 4, it may be a bit unwise to suddenly believe that because he or she is entering the SCA that all those challenges will just go away. And I know that as parents, you're going to be doing your best to work with the school teacher, work with the principal, work with the extra classes and all the other things that you're doing, but you want to consider the reality of your child's progression. So when you choose a secondary school for your child, it's reflective of a system that is able to cater to that child's needs. Miss, any thoughts on this?
It's amazing that you say that, we wait until SC, but the truth is that a lot of parents wait until SC and they get that wait up call and they, my child is a slow learner. He seemed to have difficulties in maths and he seemed to have difficulties in comprehensions and he seemed to have difficulties with the handwriting even. And you have parents who get that wake up call when the child is in standard 5. Parents, if that is you this afternoon, I need you to be mindful and be honest to yourself that it is a lot to ask the children to put forth what you have not put in, because you are asking them to exert some energy with regards to 3 years, 4 years of work in a couple of months. Let us be mindful here. What my child has had challenges from infants coming straight up. What can I do now to help as I'm sitting down and selecting these schools that will determine my child's future? So we already reached to this point. Let us move forward. Let us move forward with new information. And how am I going to choose schools? There are schools. The ministry has selected schools with remedial programs. I know in the Victoria district we have a few, so in every district we will have a few, and you need to be mindful of those schools. We call them under 30%, and it is because we realize that those schools will cater for slow learners. Right? They would enter into Form 1, there will be a remedial program, and eventually it is hopeful once the child do the work and the parents cooperate that they will catch up by the time they reach Form 2 and Form 3. Again, I said you need to do your research. You need to find out if you are in the Victoria district, the Southeastern district, the St. Patrick East district, the Port of Spain district. What are those schools? Because there are schools, as I said before, that cater for remedial learning.
Now, Miss, you talk about the schools that cater to remedial learning. You talk about the under 30%, and I could imagine the heart of some parents went straight to the big toe. So many parents, it's not the first option. We don't want to think about it and we want to wish it away. And what I want to say is, whatever classification your child falls into, whether your child is mainstream, a slow learner, remedial learner, a special needs learner, a gifted learner, it matters not. One of the things I want to encourage parents to be mindful of has to do with the notion of brain plasticity. I'm using some big words. Now, when we start to talk about brain plasticity and pruning, more or less what we want to talk about is research that shows how the brain works. And what evidence-based research has shown us is that learning causes growth of brain cells. So what that tells us is that wherever your child is now, whatever happens in the next 12 months, because remember the focus of this discussion is about getting into secondary school and settling in, we want parents to understand that as we facilitate positive learning environments, the action of learning causes the growth of brain cells. And for those of you parents who want to do a bit more research, you could go research Judy Willis, and you would find a lot more information on this. And so what I want you to remember, in addition to the fact that learning causes the growth of brain cells, I want you to remember, even in this time, is that examples of brain plasticity, which is the brain's responsiveness to all of these experiences, examples of brain plasticity have been noted when people repeatedly practice activities controlled by parts of their visual, motor, sensory, and coordination systems for specialized learning activities. So I say just this little piece to give parents hope to know that no matter where your child is at right now, your child not dumb, your child not stupid, your child not any of those things, but as we encourage positive learning environment, you would and can have positive results in your child's ability to learn over time. So don't be afraid by any one category, or if I wonder if my child this, I wonder if my child that. No, don't be afraid by any of that, because positive learning environments doesn't just make a difference in the child's emotional well-being, but it literally affects the brain and its functioning. So know that wherever your child is, they could do better. It's just up to us to coordinate with the resources, the book resources, the people resources around us to be able to facilitate that positive learning environment. Now, we've talked about special and learning needs, but the other thing I wanted for us to chat about, Miss, has to do with interest and instinct. What can you share with regards to interest when it comes to a parent observing their child and having influence over that decision as to what school should be chosen?
Okay, Ms. Lewis, before I go into interest, I would like to touch on something you talked about with regards of coordination.
Yeah.
That coordinated effort supposed to begin now. Even with the selection of schools, get your child involved. Talk to the teacher. Talk to the past teacher as to how Johnny has been doing academically, what he has been interested in, because a lot of parents, we have to be mindful of the fact that we have become so busy that we are not conscious of the fact that our child has developed this new skill or this new liking for drama or this new skill of art. So I want you to have that coordinated approach of getting into school, talking to the principal, talking to the teachers, talking to past teachers, and it will help you in realizing, what is my child interested in? And when you are choosing the school, you would be able to make a good match. Let us say we have a child who is interested in beauty culture. Do you know that there are schools that have a curriculum that accommodates beauty culture? If my child is interested in drama, there are schools that focus on drama. They have a production every year. Do you know that there are schools that are known to go internationally with art competitions and get involved in a lot of art projects in Trinidad and Tobago? Music. There are schools that push pan, choirs, they encourage the children. So when we speak about interest, knowing your child's interest, and if you don't know, it's not too late, because we know that we have to submit information just now with regards to what are your choices. Go to the school, find out, sit down, have that conversation with teacher, child, and realize, here what? He's really good at football. So, I think I'm going to put down this as one of the choices. Let us be mindful of, for the next 5 to 7 years of my child's life, I want him to be a whole individual, and I want him to develop some skills or develop in the area that he's good at. And these are his interests.
And even when you look at interests, there is, we could talk about beauty culture and football and all that, but there are schools that specializes in IT-related studies, and they have the technology and the facilities to encourage that. So if your child is heavy into tech and IT, then you want to consider those schools. So there are so many options when it comes to interest. But I could imagine there are some parents out there, Miss, that would say, My child don't know what they're interested in. I don't know what my child is interested in. And this is where I would encourage parents to consider instinct. Because sometimes when we talk about instinct, miss, we talk about that conscious awareness of a child about what they like and what they don't like. And sometimes children just kind of, oh, whatever, they go with the flow, wherever mommy, daddy say. But even in the midst of that, if you feel like as a parent, you are not clear on your child's interests, at the same time as a parent, you could look at your child's instinct. You are able as a parent to look at your child and see what are the things they naturally gravitate to. What are the things that they naturally avoid? What they show interest in? What they're naturally good at? Because when we start talking about instinct, we're not talking about a conscious awareness. We talk about the things that we do when we're not really thinking about it, when we're not realizing. Like a funny thing, I believe it was you, miss, I was mentioning. I have an instinct to talk. But as long as I can remember, I have been a talker, a productive talker.
Yes, yes, you have been.
I just always saw from as early as a child, and thank God my parents are still alive. If we were to ask them, they would say for as young as she was trying to teach somebody, for as young as she would talk, for as young as she always trying to explain something, they would talk about that. So then for my parents, if as a child, I would have gone to them to say, mommy, daddy, I want to get involved in this or that, they would have been able to look at my instinct and say, yeah, we'll sign her up for it. Yeah, we'll allow her to go. We'll allow her to be a part of. Because they would have looked at my interest. Now, I didn't know what I was doing. And so many of us as parents, we could look at, in retrospect, we could look at, wow, I had a knack for that, but it was never encouraged. Right. Nobody recognized it, so you went on another path. And so many of us as adults, we are in careers now that we regret. And we'll use a bad word, we hate, we'll whisper it, right? We hate, we get up in the morning and wishing we didn't have to go to work. Let's pay attention to our child's instinct as well. So if we recognize instinctively what does my child gravitate towards, it helps us not just in terms of choosing the school, but choosing the framework around the child. And it helps us to coordinate learning activities. I'll give you a quick example, miss. I visited in with a student at school, and I asked the student, he's new, and I asked him, I say, I want you to imagine your bedroom and tell me any 5 things in your bedroom. And he told me the color of the curtain, the pattern of the bed sheet. He mentioned some action figure, something that is on the dresser, and whatever else. When I looked at him, I said, okay, based on that response, is it right, an articulate young man, is it right to say then that you would function best if I gave you the notes in bullet point form so you could write and memorize and then we discuss? And his eyes opened big. And I could tell he's looking at me like, how did you know that? But what it was that I was paying attention. I asked him a question that helps me to learn how he functions best. So that when I coordinate services for him, the teacher is not going to go in and teach him however, but the teacher is going to go in and teach him using methods, principles, or learning styles that he naturally is in tune with. And I could have seen the relief of this boy when he realized he was not going to have a teacher just come and give him a ton of notes, and then he has to go home and figure it out. That he realized for the first time, oh my God, my class could be in a way that I could understand. And I saw the relief. And for many parents, they could do the same thing for their children. That when we pay attention to the instinctive responses that they even have to learning, parents would know how to create a framework around the child so that the next few months doesn't have to be a tragedy of an experience that they try to blank out after it's done. But because we're creating experiences that are positive, that are affirming, that makes them know that you are enough. We are in this with you to make sure that we help you get to be your level of best that is achievable at the end of the period. You find not only will they have a good prep time, but they could go into their new school with a level of confidence because they've put in the work. So even as we wind down this podcast talking about, points, critical elements that parents should consider, any closing notes that you want to leave with the parents?
Well, I hope this discussion has been helpful, because the truth and in fact is that your child is going to spend 5 to 7 years in this new environment. And at the end of it, you want them to be better. You want them to have felt that they were heard and they were accommodated. Not each school caters for all children. And as much as we would like to talk about all-inclusive education, and we want our children to be, we want our schools to be a place of inclusivity, we need to be mindful. We need to be mindful that each child is an individual and each child is different. So in that, we spoke about special needs, we spoke about learning needs. We also spoke about interest and instinct. We need to put all these things into consideration when we are looking at the grades and the 20% and the grade range and the academic achievements and the maths and English. Let us make learning a holistic approach, and let us make the choices that we make for SEA a wise choice, so that our children could go forth into the secondary school experience and have a wonderful experience.
Awesome. So even as we wind down on today's bonus podcast, we want to make sure parents that you know about the Children and Teens Counseling for Parents workshop that is coming up. Of course, Ms Halls through ALEMACSS Associates is spearheading this one-day parenting workshop, because we've talked about how to talk with your kids, positive environments, positive learning, positive relationships. But reality is, for many parents, it's a struggle. We don't always have the smoothest relationships or communication with our children. So parents, those of you who are out there that want to make an impact, know that on Saturday, the 2nd of November, starting at 9:30 a.m., ALEMACSS Associates, under the leadership of Mrs. Halls, is going to be conducting training for parents about how to develop these positive relationships with children. It's for parents of children and teens, and the training schedule includes taking a look at traditional versus modern approaches to parenting, developmental challenges that affect parenting children and teens, academic challenges that affect parenting children and teens, and creating a roadmap to positive parent-child relationships. So if you think you would benefit from being a part of this one-day parenting workshop, please be sure to call 310-8979. This one-day workshop takes place in Marabella. We would love to have you come out to this Children and Teen Counseling for Parents, a one-day parenting workshop. And a parent asks, does the child need to come? The answer is no. It's a workshop for parents, where as adults, we're able to come together and really explore how we could support developmental, academic issues, approaches to parenting, and understanding how to move forward to have that positive parent-child relationship. So, of course, this is Mrs. Lewis from SRC Private Primary. I was joined this evening once again for this bonus session by Alicia Halls, lead consultant at ALEMACSS Associates, as we were discussing critical factors to be considered when choosing secondary school options for SEA candidates. We trust that the discussion has been helpful. Please do like and share. Please do comment below. Let us know your thoughts. We're waiting to respond. We want to have a dialogue with you as we ensure that we're able to have a collaborative experience where we're able to impact and encourage each other. So this is Ms. Lewis signing out for this podcast of Parent Portal. Have a great one, and we will see you on Friday again. Well, connect with you on Friday, where we would have our traditional streaming. Yeah?
Yeah.
Have a good one, everybody.
Good night.